The first thing I heard was the click. Metal on metal. Clean, precise, dangerous. I had learned the sounds of Casa Salvatore the way some women learned lullabies. The hum of the industrial kitchen before dawn. The soft drag of Bianca, Rossi's slippers against polished hallways. The heavy front doors swallowing rich men with richer sins. And when Dante Salvatore was home, that one small sound in his study. A silver lighter opening, closing, opening again. Click. The entire west wing seemed to hold its breath with it. I stood outside his study with a tray balanced on both palms and tried to ignore the dizziness climbing the back of my neck. Lemon water in the crystal glass, black coffee in the smaller cup. A linen folded into a square so exact Bianca would not sigh at me later. My uniform felt tighter than it had a month ago, or maybe I had simply run out of places to hide inside it. There were voices inside. Male, low, one of them cracked in the middle of a plea. I stared at the seam of the door and fixed my breathing the way I had done in the maternity ward at St. Agatha's when panic rose in the middle of the night. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. Count, ignore the smell, except the smell here was never clinical. It was coffee, old wood, the expensive cold of his cologne, and something darker threaded under it tonight. Blood. Enter, a voice said, not loud. It did not need to be. I opened the door. Dante Salvatore stood near the fireplace in shirt sleeves, one hand in his pocket, the other turning that silver lighter over his knuckles. The flame never appeared. He only made it click. Across from him, on his knees, was a man with a split lip and a ruin where his dignity had been. I lowered my eyes. That was the rule, not because anyone had to say it. Because in this house, survival came from learning which truths were not yours to witness. I crossed to the desk. The lilies in the vase had begun to curl at the edges. White turning brown in the heat from the fire. Beside them sat an open employee file. Mine. My stomach dropped so fast the room swayed. I set down the tray carefully. One glass, one cup. One folded square of linen. My name sat on the folder tab in Bianca's strict handwriting. Rosso, Elena. I did not touch it. I knew better than to touch anything on that desk. Look at me, Dante said. I did, that was rule 2. If he spoke directly, you obeyed quickly enough that he never had to ask twice. His eyes were darker up close than people said. Not black, worse, human enough to change. Flat enough to hide it. Is there something you want to tell me? He asked. My tongue felt thick. About the coffee. The man on the floor made a noise that might have been a laugh if terror had not broken it in half. Dante's gaze did not move from mine. About the child. The room turned to glass. I heard everything suddenly, the fire shifting, the kneeling man dragging breath through his nose, my own pulse in my throat, click. Dante flipped the lighter once, closed it in his palm. No one in this house was supposed to know. I had hidden the vitamins, worked through the nausea, swallowed fear with dry bread before dawn. Bianca had watched me with narrowed eyes for a week, but she had not said anything. I had needed one more month, one more paycheck, one more chance to leave before my body announced me. I should have answered. I should have denied it, or lied, or cried. Women survived on those things all the time. Instead, I looked at the file, because some stupid part of me needed to know what had betrayed me. A clinic slip stuck out between the pages, sent Agatha maternity services. My confirmation visit from 10 days earlier, the one I had paid cash for. At the bottom, stamped in blue, was the intake date copied from an older emergency form. 14 September. Dante went still. Until then, I had thought stillness belonged to holy places or empty rooms. I had been wrong. His kind of stillness was alive. It spread. It changed the air pressure. Even the bleeding man on the floor seemed to realize he had become less important than paper. What is that date? Dante asked. My mouth opened, closed. It's when the form was opened, I whispered. At St. Agatha S. His thumb froze on the lighter hinge. The kneeling man dared a glance up. Bad choice. Luca Ferretti stepped from the wall behind him like something detached from shadow and put a hand on his shoulder. A warning, not a comfort. Dante took the file and looked again, slower this time. Not at my name, Not at the pregnancy line, at the date. I had seen powerful men angry, drunk men loud, priests disappointed. Nothing in my life had prepared me for a man who looked at paper the way another man might look at a grave. "Who treated you?" he said. "I don't remember." "You remember." "Yes." My fingers tightened around the edge of the tray, "but I don't know if the name matters." Something flickered in his face, not softness, recognition maybe. Of caution, of fear trying to disguise itself as obedience. The lighter slipped from his hand and hit the desk once before dropping to the carpet beside my shoe. Nobody moved. Then I did the thing that changed everything. I bent, picked up the lighter and placed it neatly beside my file. Straight, parallel to the folder edge. The way things were arranged in Bianca's linen cupboards. The way I had once set surgical trays at St. Agatha's so frightened mothers would see order and breathe easier. Then, without thinking, I turned the vase of lilies so the dead side faced the wall. A stupid, silent act, a maid's reflex, fix the room, make it less ugly. When I looked up, Dante was staring at me as if I had slapped him. Nobody begged in front of him. Nobody ignored the theater of his power to straighten flowers. I knew that only later. In that moment, all I knew was that the floor felt suddenly far away. "I didn't want anyone to know," I said, because the room had become too bright. "I just needed a little more time." "For what?" he asked. "To disappear." The kneeling man made another sound. Dante never looked at him. "Luca," Dante said softly. "Yes, boss, take him out." The man on the floor began pleading so fast the words tripped over one another. Dante didn't raise his voice. Luca hauled him up. The door opened, closed. His terror left the room with him. Then it was only me, Dante, the dead lilies, and the date. "You worked at St. Agatha's," Dante said. "A few night shifts, cleaning, filing. Whatever they paid for." On the 14th of September, the edges of my vision darkened. I nodded once. His jaw tightened, not with anger, with control. "You will tell me everything you remember." "I don't," the dizziness won. "I hate fainting. It feels like betrayal, the body leaving without permission." 1 second I was standing in front of the most dangerous man in Sicily, and the next the tray tilted, glass shattered, and the cold climbed hard and fast up my knees. I remember almost nothing after that. A curse, not mine. Strong hands catching me before marble did, the scent of smoke and winter on his shirt. The click of the lighter again, closer now, like a heartbeat made of metal. When I woke, the study lamps were lower. I was on the leather sofa. Matteo Caruso, Dante's doctor, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist with the grave concentration of a priest selecting sins. "She needs rest," he said. "I need work," I murmured. Matteo snorted softly. "You need iron, water, and a world less determined to kill you." Dante stood by the window, back half-turned. "How far along?" 12 weeks, Matteo said. I closed my eyes. Silence stretched. Then Dante asked the question that told me my old life had ended already, even if my body had not caught up to it. "Can she travel?" Matteo looked at him. "Not tonight." "Good," Dante said. I opened my eyes. "Good." His gaze found mine unreadable. "Because you're not leaving this house, quiet girl." That was the first time he called me that, not tenderly, not kindly, as an observation. A possession not yet claimed but already circled. I pushed myself upright. "You can't keep me here." The corner of his mouth moved by less than a smile. Then he clicked the lighter shut, and gave the order that closed the first door behind me forever. "Lock the west wing." When I was little, I used to believe rich houses made different kinds of silence. Poor silence was thin. It let in neighbors fighting through plaster, water knocking old pipes, the cough of a man in the apartment below who smoked himself toward God every winter. Rich silence was thick, cushioned. It absorbed shame before it hit the floor. The West Wing had that kind. I woke in a room the size of my entire childhood apartment. Pale walls, a carved ceiling. French doors that opened onto a terrace lined with terracotta pots, and watched by 2 armed men who pretended the sea interested them more than I did. There was a breakfast tray untouched on the table. Toast, fruit, tea, no coffee. Someone, probably Matteo, had decided I no longer deserved small pleasures. The nausea came in waves, but fear stayed steady. A lock clicked outside. Bianca Rossi entered with folded towels over her arm and disappointment already arranged across her face. "I told them not to put white flowers in here," she muttered, glaring at the vase by my bed. "They look like funerals." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. She stopped. "For what?" It was a cruel question because I had too many answers. Bianca set the towels down. She was in her 50s, severe in black dresses, hair pinned so tightly it seemed ambition alone held it in place. Most of the staff feared her more honestly than they feared Dante because she noticed things. Dust, lies, weakness. Now she noticed me. "You should have told me," she said. I looked at my hands. "And then what?" Her face softened in one dangerous corner. "I would have found you somewhere safer than this." The word safer nearly made me laugh. The West Wing was beautiful, guarded, and expensive. It was also a cage. "I can still leave," I said. "No," Bianca said. "You cannot." The door opened again before I could answer. Oscar Bellini came in backward, carrying 2 boxes and talking before his feet finished entering the room. "If Maria has sent bread, tell her I rebuke her in the name of protein. I have discipline now, I have structure. I am a man transformed." He turned, saw me, and stopped with theatrical horror. "Madonna." "They didn't tell me the prisoner had eyes." Bianca shut the door with her hip. "And they didn't tell me stupidity could wear a suit." Oscar ignored her. He was broad-shouldered, handsome in a careless way, and forever half a second away from disaster. Dante trusted him with a gun, a steering wheel, and apparently nothing else. His tie was crooked. His hair needed cutting. His expression suggested he took neither issue seriously. He placed 1 box on the table. "Tea biscuits, not from Maria." "Those would contain emotional sabotage." Bianca pinched the bridge of her nose. "You are 32 years old. Stop behaving like a radio comedian." "Maria told me yesterday my face looks swollen," Oscar said mournfully. "Do you understand? Swollen. I haven't eaten pasta after 8 in 8 days." I stared at him. He stared back, then lowered his voice. "You're the maid who fainted in the boss's study." My face heated. "I'm Oscar. Driver, security, occasional scapegoat. If you need anything, ask Bianca. If you need something impossible, ask Matteo. If you need someone to die dramatically in the courtyard to create a distraction, I'm available after lunch." "Out," Bianca snapped. He placed a hand over his heart. "Maria also told me I lack mystery. I am trying a new persona." "Out," Oscar sighed, then pointed a warning finger at the biscuit box. "If Maria says they're low sugar, she's lying. That woman wants me buried before summer." He left. Bianca closed her eyes for one long second as if prayer remained a habit even here. Despite myself, I smiled. "There," Bianca said quietly. "You still can." I didn't understand. "What?" "Smile, that matters." She came closer and lowered her voice. "Listen carefully, Alina. Men will tell you Dante Salvatore is cruel. Sometimes he is. But he is not careless. If he has locked you here, it is because the thing tied to you scares him. That means it should scare you too." Before I could ask what she meant, the door opened a 3rd time. Dante entered, and the room changed shape around him. He wore a charcoal suit today, no tie, the first 2 buttons of his shirt undone as if he had no patience for decoration. He did not look at the food. He did not look at Bianca. He looked only at me. Bianca left without being told. Dante crossed to the window. He didn't sit. Men like him made other people sit. "You worked nights at St. Agatha's for 4 months. Yes. You cleaned records rooms. Yes. You were there on September 14th. I swallowed. "Yes." He let the silence stretch until it became work to stand inside it. Then, very calmly, "Tell me what happened." I curled my fingers into the bedspread. "There was a gala upstairs. Wealthy donors, politicians, too much perfume, too many men who smiled without warmth. Then the power went out in the East Hall. A woman screamed, not loud. More like she had put a hand over her own mouth. He watched my face, not the words. I was sent down to the records basement for fresh linens," I went on. "That's when I smelled smoke. Not big fire smoke, paper smoke, Electrical, wrong, I heard voices behind the archive door. Whose? I didn't see, but you heard. Yes. I tried not to remember, but the room came anyway. The hot metal smell, the dark, the single emergency light throwing red over shelves. One man said, change the dates. Another said, if she talks, burn the whole wing. Dante's expression did not change. That was worse than anger. I ran, I said. That's all. His gaze dropped briefly to my stomach, then back to my face. Not judgment, calculation. You told no one. Who would have believed me? He moved a fraction closer. Who is the father? The question hit harder because it was quiet. I looked away. No one you know. That is not an answer. It's the only one I have. He could have pressed. He didn't. He only reached into his pocket, took out the silver lighter and clicked it once. Here are the rules, he said. You stay in this wing unless Bianca, Matteo, or I say otherwise. You do not use the phones. You do not speak to staff about St. Agatha. You eat what Matteo sends. If you feel faint, you tell someone before you fall. I'm not a child. No, he said. Your evidence. The word took a layer off my skin. Something in my face must have shown it, because his jaw shifted once, as if he hated that he'd said exactly what he meant. I heard myself ask, if I tell you everything, will you let me go? His answer came without delay. When it is safe. That was not yes. It was worse. It was honest enough to be a leash. He turned to leave. At the door, he stopped without facing me. Bianca says you apologized to the broken glass after you fainted. Heat climbed my neck. I don't remember that. I do. A beat. Eat, quiet girl. Then he walked out, and somehow those 3 words felt more controlling than the lock. 3 days passed before I saw the sea from anywhere except the terrace. By then I knew the rhythm of confinement. Matteo arrived each morning with vitamins, blood pressure checks, and a face carved from practical concern. Bianca brought clothes that fit my changing body without comment. Maria Conti sent food with too much butter whenever Oscar announced a new diet in the kitchen loud enough for heaven to hear. At night, the house changed register. The guards' footsteps slowed. Men came and went through the front hall in expensive shoes and low voices. Sometimes I woke to the sound of cars arriving after midnight. Sometimes to the silver click from somewhere below, as if Dante's insomnia moved through walls. On the 4th morning, Bianca let me help her sort chapel linens. The chapel sat in the oldest part of the house, stone-cool even in May. Salvator men were not saints, but they kept saints close, perhaps as a negotiation tactic. Candles burned before a dark Madonna. Brass holders gleamed. Dust stayed away from holy places here the way laughter stayed away from funerals. I knelt to unfold an altar cloth and found my hands settling for the first time in days. Linen obeyed. Creases could be worked out. Stains, if caught quickly enough, could be lifted. You handle fabric like a conservator, Bianca said from the cabinet. My father restored church books, I said before I could stop myself. Bindings, paper, ink. He said old things tear faster when people think they're already ruined. Bianca glanced over. And now he's dead and I'm a maid. She shut the cabinet more gently than usual. You are what you survive. The words stayed with me because I did not want them to. When Matteo came in 10 minutes later with his black medical case, there was blood on his cuff. I stood so fast the room tipped. Who's hurt? Not you if you sit back down, he said. I used to help in triage. Matteo paused. You what? At St. Agatha's night shifts, cleaning first, then basic charting when they were short-handed, vitals, bandaging, intake paperwork. I'm not a nurse, but you know what to do. Yes, he considered me. Oscar caught a graze on his arm because he thinks doors are decorative. From the corridor, Oscar yelled. It was a tactical entrance. Matteo rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. God keeps him alive to mock the rest of us. He led me into the anteroom where Oscar sat on a wooden chair with his jacket off, glaring suspiciously at Gauze. It's nothing, he declared. If Maria asks, tell her I didn't even bleed. She likes to look unimpressed, but secretly she worries. She does not worry, Bianca said. She rebukes, Oscar corrected. That is Mediterranean affection. I cleaned the cut while he narrated his own suffering in operatic detail. He flexed each time I reached for the antiseptic. If you faint on me, I'll take it personally, he warned. I don't faint that often. Excellent, because I have a reputation. What reputation? He considered. Unclear. But I protect it fiercely. I laughed before I could swallow it back, and at the doorway Dante stopped. He had entered so quietly none of us heard him. One shoulder rested against the frame. His eyes went first to Oscar's bandage, then to my hands, then to the open chapel cabinet where old record books waited for Bianca's inventory. She has decent hands, Matteo said. Steadier than yours, Dante looked at me. So you file records, restore paper, clean blood, and faint in strategic places. I didn't plan the last one. No, he said. That much was obvious, Oscar brightened. Boss, if we're listing talents, I'd like recorded that I nearly died with excellent posture. You scraped a door hinge, Dante said. A violent one. The corner of Dante's mouth moved. It wasn't a smile. It was what might have happened if one had tried and thought better of it. He stepped inside. The chapel went quieter, as if even candle flame recognized rank. What are those? He asked, nodding toward the cabinet. Parish ledgers from the old coast chapel, Bianca said. Water damage on the lower shelves. He looked at me again. Can you restore them? Some, I said cautiously. If the ink hasn't bled too far. Show me. Bianca made a small sound of protest, but Dante ignored it. He carried one volume to the wooden table and opened it with a care I had not seen in him before. The pages were warped, edges feathered from damp. Names, dates, baptisms, burials. I touched the paper lightly. Not flat heat, I murmured. That will set the wrinkles, slow pressure, absorbent sheets between the pages, weight, not force. Why do you know that? Dante asked. Because ruined things don't survive rough hands. The silence that followed felt different, less like interrogation, more like being noticed in a way I did not trust. Then my eye caught on a loose slip tucked inside the ledger, not church paper, modern, clinic stock, a note folded in half. I froze. Dante saw it. What? My pulse stumbled. That paper, it's from St. Agatha S. He unfolded it. Only one line remained legible through water bloom. Check September births against chapel entries. El Dante went so still the chapel lamps hummed in the gap. Who is El? I asked. He closed the slip once, twice, very carefully. No one you need to worry about. That was the first lie he told me directly, and even then I knew it was one. A phone buzzed in his pocket. He read the screen, face flattening further. What happened? Matteo asked. Someone tried to get into the East Archives downtown. Bianca looked up sharply. Looking for what? Dante's gaze did not leave the soaked note in his hand. The same thing that got my sister killed. The word hit me before the meaning did. Your sister. He never talked about family, not the living kind, certainly not the dead. He slid the note back into the ledger and shut it. Matteo, double the guards. Bianca, move her room to the interior hall. Oscar, I'm already heroic, Oscar said, rising. Try being useful, Oscar sighed. Always with the impossible standards. As they moved, Dante looked at me once more, longer this time, measuring. Remembering, the baby turned, not really, not yet too small for that, but I placed a hand low over my stomach anyway, instinctive. His eyes followed the gesture. Something flickered, then was gone. From now on, he said, you don't go anywhere in this house alone. Why? He opened the lighter, closed it. Because somebody has started moving. The first time Dante touched me on purpose, blood was already in the air. It happened in the lower courtyard, where Bianca had sent me with Maria to strip lavender from the old stone planters before the afternoon heat bruised it. Maria worked with the brisk, insulted competence of a woman who had spent 20 years feeding armed men and had no intention of respecting any of them. I liked her instantly. Not like that, she said, swatting my hand away from a stem. If you rip from the middle, it goes bitter. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing to plants, she muttered. They're more resilient than men. The courtyard smelled of rosemary, dust, and sun-warmed limestone. Beyond the walls, the sea flashed silver. For 10 minutes, with a basket at my feet and lavender oil on my fingers, I could almost pretend I was just a maid again. Then the shot cracked. Maria dropped to the ground before I even understood what the sound was. A second later, my body caught up. Someone shouted from the arcade. Another shot punched stone above us. Chips sprayed my cheek. "Elena," Maria screamed, but I had already frozen. Not because I wanted to, because terror, real terror, is not dramatic. It empties you out. It makes the world narrow to one bright, violent point. Then Dante was there. He crossed the courtyard so fast it didn't look like movement at all, only consequence. His hand closed around my wrist and yanked me hard behind the fountain. My shoulder hit his chest. His other arm came over my head just as another bullet struck marble where my face had been. "Down," he said. I was down already, knees on wet stone, palm in fountain water. His body half over mine, making himself a wall. The silver lighter fell from his pocket and slid against my hand with a clean metallic click. That tiny sound hit some irrational part of me harder than gunfire. Here, real. Men flooded the courtyard, Luca, Oscar, 2 guards from the West Terrace. Orders rang sharp in Sicilian. Somewhere a gate slammed. Somewhere else a man screamed and was silenced quickly enough that I knew whose side he was on. Dante didn't look away from the archway. "Are you hit?" he asked. I shook my head. "Use words, quiet girl." "No." His hand tightened once around my wrist, not painfully, just enough to anchor me. "Good." Then I felt warmth hit the back of my hand. Not fountain water. Blood. I looked up. A dark line ran from beneath his left sleeve, sliding over the hard angle of his wrist. "You're bleeding. It's nothing. You got shot." "Scraped." I stared at him. He stared at the archway as if bullets were administrative inconveniences. Oscar appeared on the other side of the fountain, breathing hard, hair half fallen over his forehead. "Good news," he said. "I'm alive." "That was never high on my list," Dante answered. Oscar put a hand to his own chest. "This is why Maria says I should marry someone kinder." "Maria says you should chew with your mouth closed," Maria shouted from behind a pillar. Even with gun smoke still hanging in the courtyard, I almost laughed. The sound came out broken and breathless, but it was enough to make Oscar look absurdly pleased with himself. Then Dante shifted. A flicker, tiny but wrong. His hand had gone slick on my wrist. "Sit still," I said. It came out sharper than I meant to. He glanced down at me as if remembering I was there. For one impossible second, the noise of the courtyard receded, and it was only his face, too close, and the line of pain he would not name. "I know how to bandage a graze," I whispered. "After bullets, after worse." He held my gaze one moment longer, then rose just enough to let Luca drag him toward the covered arcade. His fingers slid from my wrist at the last second. I missed the weight of them instantly and hated myself for noticing. Inside, the lower salon became a command post in under a minute. Men moved in and out with radios and blood-specked cuffs. Matteo arrived swearing in low, elegant bursts. Dante sat on the edge of a carved table while I stood opposite with gauze and antiseptic, because Matteo, after one look at my face, thrust the supplies at me and said, "If he argues." Ignore him. The scrape was ugly but shallow. Still, when I pushed his sleeve higher, I saw the older scar beneath it. Not from today, not from any clean accident. It ran white and twisted from the inside of his wrist, up toward the elbow, the shape of a burn that had once blistered badly enough to rewrite skin. I must have looked too long because his forearm tightened under my hand. "Fire?" I asked before I could stop myself. The room went quieter than it already was. Dante said nothing. Matteo spoke instead, too lightly. "Our fearless employer once made a poor decision involving a locked records room." That was all. No story, no details. But I saw Dante's jaw lock and understood that whatever had burned him had taken more than skin. I cleaned the scrape. He did not flinch. He did not thank me either, which for some reason I preferred. When I finished, my fingertips brushed the inside of his wrist. Pulse, hot, controlled, alive. He looked at my hand as if it had done something indecent. Then he stood. "Everyone out," he said. No one argued. Not Oscar, though he paused in the doorway to whisper to me, "If I die before Maria admits she likes me, burn my protein powder." Maria smacked the back of his head on her way past. A second later, the room belonged only to Dante and me. I went a step back. His hand closed lightly around my wrist again. The same wrist, same place. "You should have dropped when Maria did," he said. "I know. Fear isn't obedience." "No, then what was it?" I opened my mouth, but the truth was too embarrassing to survive air. I had not frozen from stupidity. I had frozen because for one insane beat I had thought if I moved wrong, he would be hit instead of me. He read none of that or all of it. I couldn't tell. His thumb shifted once against my pulse, not a caress, a fact. "Next time," he said, voice lower now, "you move when I say move." "There's going to be a next time." His eyes darkened. Yes, I wanted to ask how he could sound so certain. I wanted to ask who had shot at us in broad daylight. I wanted to ask what date on my file had dragged a dead girl into his face. Instead, I heard myself say, "Your lighter fell." He looked down. The silver lighter still sat on the side table where I had placed it after crawling in from the courtyard. Straight. Parallel to the edge, something changed in his expression. Small, dangerous. "Nobody fixes things in front of me," he said quietly. I didn't understand. "What, when they're afraid?" His gaze moved from the lighter to my face. "They beg, they cry, they bargain. I didn't know there were rules." "There are." His hand loosened but did not leave me. "And you keep breaking the wrong ones." The words should have frightened me. Maybe they did. But his hand was still at my wrist, warm and steady over the place my pulse refused to calm. And for the first time since I had entered his house, I felt the edge of something worse than fear. Not safety, the possibility of it. Then he let go, picked up the lighter, and clicked it shut with a sound that went through me like a promise I wasn't ready to hear. My secret stopped belonging to me on a Thursday evening. By then the house had fallen into a new pattern. Guards doubled, windows checked twice, conversations cut off when I entered. Nobody said war. Nobody needed to. It lived in the walls. Bianca found me in the old linen room with chapel ledgers spread across the table and a lamp pulled low over my shoulder. I had asked for absorbent sheets, weights, and a bone folder. She had given them to me without questions, which in Bianca's language meant she was worried enough not to waste time. The note from the water-damaged ledger had been bothering me for 2 days. Check September births against chapel entries. L. I had copied the visible names, compared them against the Coast Parish baptisms, and found what I wasn't supposed to find. Children entered twice. Some under one surname in the clinic records, another in the church books. A few with dates altered by 1 week, some with no corresponding baptism at all. Missing babies hidden inside expensive paperwork. I heard Bianca before I saw her. "If Dante finds you working at midnight, he'll assume I've lost control of the house. You never lose control of anything. That is because I distrust Joy." She came beside me and read the columns in silence. Her mouth flattened. "Lucia was right." I looked up. "Lucia was his sister." "Yes, she wrote the note." Bianca nodded once. "She volunteered at St. Agatha S. Thought charity made monsters easier to detect." She was wrong about that, but right about the books. "What happened to her?" Bianca's eyes went to the chapel door down the corridor as if the answer still listened from there. "She found proof that powerful men were buying discretion through the clinic. Unregistered births. Dead infants made convenient on paper. Living infants moved elsewhere." A week later, the records wing-burned. A pause. Dante was there. He got 2 nurses out and came back burned for Lucia. He found only her bracelet. My throat tightened around air. Everything in him made a different kind of sense suddenly. The stillness, the fire scar, the way he looked at dates as if they could reopen skin. The baby shifted low in my belly, not a real kick yet, just a liquid tightening, and my hand moved there without thought. Bianca saw. "How much of this is tied to you?" "I don't know." That was true and not true. There was one memory I had kept buried so deep I almost believed it had happened to another woman. The gala at St. Agatha S., the donor room upstairs. champagne balanced on trays, a man pressing too close in a corridor smelling of roses and bleach. His cufflink catching the light, a black enamel crest split by a silver line. DeLuca. I had told myself not to remember the rest in sequence, only in fragments, a locked office, a hand over my mouth. My own body disappearing from me 1 inch at a time. Bianca looked at me for a long moment. You know more than you are saying. Before I could answer, the linen room door opened. Dante entered with Luca behind him. Luca had become gentler with me over the week in ways almost invisible to anyone else. A door held open. An extra blanket left outside my room after a cold night. Men like him expressed kindness the way other men handled explosives, quickly and only when necessary. Now his face was unreadable. Dante looked from Bianca to the ledgers to me. Explain! So I did. The duplicated entries, the altered dates, the missing baptisms. I kept my voice steady because I had discovered something worse than fear. If I let myself shake in front of him, he noticed. He read the copied names, then the ledger itself. His attention sharpened over one specific line. This child, he said, born September 15th. Baptized a week earlier under another surname. Yes, and this notation in the margin, I leaned closer. Private transfer, no family contact. The silence that followed had weight. Vittorio, Dante said finally. I had heard the name before in passing, always in tones people used for rot they could not cut out. Vittorio De Luca. Banker, political host. Family friend, if one used the word friend loosely enough to include men who smiled while arranging funerals. Luca swore under his breath. Dante closed the book. No one leaves this room with a copy of these notes. Too late, a voice drawled from the doorway. Oscar leaned in with a tray balanced on one hand. Maria says if anyone is dismantling a criminal birth ring after dark, they will do it with soup. He noticed the faces. Ah, this is not a soup mood. It never is with you in the room, Bianca said. Oscar set the tray down anyway. Excellent, because I brought bread too, against my dietary principles. For morale, despite everything, the absurdity cracked the tension just enough for me to breathe. Then Dante's gaze moved to me again. Everyone out except Alina, Bianca hesitated. Luca did too. That told me more than their words would have. Then they left, Oscar reluctantly, carrying his own bread slice like a sacrament. The room shrank. Dante stood on the opposite side of the table. Tell me who the father is. No softness, no anger, just the question, finally stripped of room to dodge. I stared at the warped grain of the wood. A man from the gala. Name, I don't know which name he used. His voice dropped. Face. I closed my eyes and saw only fragments. A cufflink, sent too sweet over whiskey. A laugh at the wrong moment. The De Luca crest, I whispered. When I looked up, Dante's expression had become frighteningly calm. Did he force you? Silence can answer. Mine did. His hand flattened on the table, and for a second I thought the wood might split beneath it. I didn't tell anyone, I said. I thought if I stayed small enough it would become only mine. Nothing done to you is only yours, he said. The words should have felt like theft. Instead they sounded like fury trying to become protection before it knew how. I laughed once. It came out ugly. That's a very noble sentence for a man who called me evidence. His face changed. Not much, enough. You are not only that. The room tipped under the force of hearing it. I looked away first. I don't know what you want from me. His answer was immediate. Truth, and if I give it to you. He took the silver lighter from his pocket, opened it, then shut it again. Click. Then I kill the man who thought you would disappear quietly. My breath caught. Not because of the violence. Because of the certainty, he could have stepped closer. He didn't. That was worse. The distance itself became charged. I wanted to say don't. I wanted to say please. I wanted to say I am so tired of men deciding what my life will cost. Instead, I asked the one thing that mattered. Will it bring your sister back? Something like pain crossed his face too quickly to hold. No, he said. Then, after a beat that felt like a confession, but it will tell the dead I was paying attention. He left me with that, and the sound of the lighter in my bones. At the door, Luca paused just long enough to murmur, "Lock your window tonight." I turned. "Why?" His eyes flicked away from mine. "Because someone on the inside told them where to aim this morning." Then he was gone, and betrayal entered the house before anyone had proved it. War arrived in the rain. Palermo thunderstorms were never polite. They did not roll in. They seized the sky and shook it until windows rattled. That night the whole house smelled of ozone and wet stone. Lightning made the corridors look briefly haunted. I was in the old nursery on the interior hall because Bianca said the room had no outer wall and therefore no opinions about bullets. She had sent me there with tea and a pile of mending I had not touched. The baby made my back ache. Fear made the ache worse. At midnight the power cut. Not all of it, just enough. The lamp died. The hall lights blinked once and went black. Somewhere downstairs a man shouted. Then another voice, closer, wrong. I was already on my feet when the nursery door opened. Dante crossed the room in darkness and shut it behind him with one hand. Rainwater slicked his hair back from his face. Blood marked the white cuff of his shirt. His gun stayed low at his thigh, as if violence in his grip was more natural than empty hands on anyone else. "Shoes," he said. I was barefoot. I bent for them and my hands shook. He came closer, faster. "Leave them. What's happening?" They came through the kitchen entrance and the service gate together. He moved to the wardrobe, shoved it aside, and revealed a narrow door I had never noticed. "There's a stair to the roof passage. Matteo is taking Bianca and Maria through the chapel corridor. Oscar's covering the east hall." I stared. "And you?" His gaze found mine. "I'm taking you." That should not have mattered. It did. Thunder cracked. A shot answered from somewhere below. The baby clenched low in my body, a sickening hard grip of fear. Dante saw my face and stepped nearer, not touching yet, choosing not to. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Can you listen?" I nodded. "Then listen." His voice was low, controlled, the way men probably spoke right before surgery. "You stay behind me on the stair. If I tell you to run, you run. If I go down, you do not stop." "No," his jaw hardened. "No, I'm not stepping over you to save myself." For one impossible second, something almost like anger flashed in his eyes, not at me. At the fact that I had said exactly what he would have had to fear hearing, he looked away first. "Quiet girl." Not cold this time. Worn, human. Then the nursery window exploded. Glass flew inward. Dante moved before I did, one arm around my waist, hauling me hard against the wall as two shots tore through the curtains. I made a sound into his shoulder that I would have denied under torture. He fired back through the shattered frame without releasing me. The recoil traveled through both of us. "Move," he said. We took the hidden stair in darkness, broken only by lightning through slit windows. The stone steps were narrow and slick with old damp. His body stayed between mine and the drop. Twice he reached back without looking and found my wrist in the dark, guiding me around sharp turns. Halfway up, voices sounded below us. Men, too close. Dante shoved open the roof hatch and pushed me out into rain so heavy it felt like being hit. The roof walkway ran along the inner courtyard, low parapet on one side, black sky on the other. Matteo and Bianca were nowhere in sight. Good or terrible, I couldn't tell. A figure moved at the far end. Dante's gun came up. "Boss, don't shoot, it's me," Oscar gasped, appearing out of the rain with Maria tucked under one arm and looking personally offended by weather. "I am too handsome to die on a roof," Maria elbowed him. "You're too loud to die anywhere." Even then, even soaked and shaking and moments from disaster, I nearly laughed. Then another figure rose behind Oscar with a rifle. I didn't think. I grabbed the rusted roof lantern at my feet and hurled it. It struck the rifleman's shoulder just as he fired. The shot went wide. Dante took him down before the body finished folding. Everyone stared at me. Oscar blinked rain from his lashes. I take back every delicate assumption I ever made. Dante looked at the fallen man, then at me. Something fierce and startled moved through his face. "That," he said quietly, "was not what I expected." "Neither did I," I whispered. A second shot cracked from the opposite parapet. Dante spun, cursed, and shoved us all toward the hatch. The movement brought him directly against me, one hand braced above my head on the stone, his chest hard and hot through wet cloth. We stopped breathing. Not really, but close enough. Rain ran from his hair onto my cheek. My hand, traitorous and shaking, closed around the front of his shirt to steady myself. He looked at my mouth once, only once, then away. "Go," he said. He could have kissed me. He didn't. That hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. We made the lower chapel by some mercy I still can't explain. Men loyal to Dante had regained the service hall. The attackers were either dead or running. The house stank of rain, cordite, and broken plaster. Maria cried only after she saw the bullet hole in Oscar's jacket and realized his blood wasn't on it. Matteo locked me in the chapel anteroom to check the baby, while Dante took stock of bodies and damage. I sat on the cot with wet hair sticking to my neck and tried to calm down enough for my hands to stop being useless. The door opened later than I expected. Dante came in alone. His knuckles were split, one cheekbone had darkened, there was blood on his collar, not all his. "The baby?" he asked. "Still there," a rough laugh left him. Good, he should have gone. I should have told him to. Instead, we stood in the little room full of old incense and wet stone, and every almost we had been building toward crowded in with us. He reached up slowly, so slowly I could have moved away if I'd wanted, and tucked damp hair behind my ear. His fingers shook once against my skin, gone almost before it happened. "I should send you away tonight," he said. "You won't." "No. Why?" He looked at me the way a man might look at the edge of his own honesty. Then, very quietly, "Because you were afraid of me from the first day, but not for yourself." His thumb brushed the line of rain still clinging to my jaw. "You picked up my lighter. You fixed the flowers. You looked at a room I had made ugly, and your first instinct was to make it less so." A beat. "No one in my world does that." The words hit harder than if he had touched me everywhere. My throat tightened. "I don't know what to do with this." "Neither do I should have stepped back." Instead, I whispered the smallest, most exposing truth I had. "If you kiss me, I think I'll be more afraid of wanting it than of you." His eyes closed for one heartbeat. Then he kissed my forehead. Nothing more, a restraint so devastating it made my eyes burn. When he stepped away, the room felt colder. War had arrived, and now so had something worse. Need. By morning, one man was dead in the west courtyard. 2 more were missing, and Bianca had a graze across her ribs she pretended was insulting rather than painful. The house moved around damage like a body learning to walk on a broken foot. Windows were boarded. Floors were scrubbed. Men who had served espresso yesterday carried rifles today. Nobody mentioned the blood under the lemon trees. I spent half the day in Matteo's office helping him inventory medical supplies because if I sat still, I thought too much. He tolerated my presence with the resignation of a man who had realized I would not obey sensible advice. "You're pale," he said. "You're rude. You fit in here more each day." That should have sounded like warning. It sounded like grief. By dusk, Dante had not slept in 30 hours. I knew because his lighter clicked in 3 different rooms as the day wore on, and because when I brought him coffee outside the map room, Lucas stopped me with a hand to the doorframe. "He's not in a speaking mood." "When is he?" Lucas surprised me by almost smiling, then it vanished. "You shouldn't be kind to men like us. It confuses the structure." The words landed oddly because they sounded rehearsed, as if he had told them to himself before. Before I could answer, a runner came from the front gate, breathless. Shaken, the car from the city was hit. "Maria's brother is dead." Everything went quiet. Maria made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. Dante moved first. He always did. Orders, names. Routes blocked, men dispatched, but there are violences no command can reach. Maria sank against the kitchen wall, apron twisted in her fists, and all the power in the house could not undo a single bullet an hour outside Palermo. That was the cost, not abstract, not strategic. A woman I liked with flour still on her sleeve making a sound, so raw it turned my bones soft. I went to her because nobody else did, not immediately. Men in these houses knew how to avenge grief better than they knew how to sit beside it. She clutched my hand like drowning. He drove produce, she said. He hated olives. He said they looked like little eyes. I cried with her, quietly, stupidly, without dignity. From the doorway, Dante watched once, then turned away so deliberately I knew he was giving us privacy the only way he knew how, by pretending distance. That night Matteo came to my room with a passport, train ticket, and envelope of cash. I stared at them. What is this? Your way out. My pulse stumbled. Dante knows. He ordered it. Something tore cleanly through me. Matteo put the passport on the bed. A new name, new city, Florence, a boarding room above a widow's bakery. Work arranged under Bianca's cousin. This is real, he said. If you leave before dawn, Vittorio's watchers won't know which road you took. And Dante, he stays here and finishes what he started. The baby moved low and strange, as if sensing my panic. I looked at the papers until the letters blurred. This was what I had wanted. Escape. Anonymous walls. A life not measured by armed men and blood on marble, and the sound of a silver lighter in dark halls. So why did it feel like being cut open? At 4 a.m, Oscar drove me to the station in an unmarked car. He had a bruise across his jaw and a paper bag full of boiled eggs he insisted were travel food for champions. I hate that I'm helping with this, he said, as Palermo's streets slid gray around us. Then why are you? Because the boss asked, a beat. And because Maria won't look at me unless I bring coffee now, which means her grief has advanced to a level I cannot combat. I laughed wetly and wiped my face. Oscar glanced over. His own eyes softened. You know he sent Luca with the decoy car and kept the safer route for you. That hurt worse. Don't, I'm only saying, I know what you're saying. At the platform, the train waited under sour fluorescent lights. Not romantic, not cinematic, just metal and departure. Oscar carried my bag. If you change your mind, he said too casually, don't tell me I am exhausted. I stepped onto the train. That should have been the end of it. I found my seat, sat. Pressed my hand over the curve of my stomach. Outside, porters shouted. Steam hissed. A child cried 2 cars down. Ordinary sounds, radical sounds, a life that could still be mine if I chose it. Then I saw the man across the platform, not clearly, just enough. Dark coat. De Luca crest at the cuff, watching the windows, watching this train. Cold spread through me so fast I nearly choked on it. If Vittorio knew this route, he would know the others. The decoy car, Luca, anyone sent in my place. Maria's brother had already died because of this war. How many more ordinary people would be folded into it while I ran carrying evidence inside my body? The answer was simple enough to stand. I got off the train before it moved. Oscar, halfway back to the car, turned and stared. No, he said. Absolutely no. I have already had one dramatic event before sunrise. I walked past him. Elena. I stopped then, because this had to be said while I could still choose otherwise. If I leave now, I spend the rest of my life wondering who died because I wanted to be untouched by something that had already touched me. Oscar's face changed. The humor didn't vanish. It made room. You're sure? No, I swallowed. That's how I know it's a choice. He exhaled hard through his nose. Madonna. That sounded like something the boss would think and never say. I handed him the fake passport. Then I tore it in half. The sound was small, final. By the time we reached the house again, dawn had gone colorless. Men moved in the courtyard with the depleted, vicious focus of those who had not slept. Dante stood on the chapel steps speaking to Luca. He saw me. Everything in him stopped. Luca turned too, expression unreadable. Then he walked away to give us the kind of privacy men in his world only offered in emergencies. I climbed the steps with the train ticket still in my pocket. I saw a watcher at the station. That was the practical part, the easier part. Dante descended 1 step. Why are you here? Because I chose you was too large to survive saying. So I gave him the smaller truth. Because leaving became another way to make other people pay. His gaze dropped to the torn passport in my hand, then back to my face. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a gravity that felt almost terrible in its softness, "Come inside, quiet girl." And I did, not trapped, not dragged. I walked back into the dark with my eyes open. The betrayal announced itself with Luca's silence. I noticed because he had become one of the few men in the house whose quiet did not immediately frighten me. It had texture now, restraint, weariness, a dry humor he spent carefully. So when I crossed the south corridor that evening and found him standing outside Dante's office like a statue carved from guilt, I stopped. "Are you hurt?" I asked. His eyes shifted to mine. "No, you look like it," a faint, almost smile. "You notice too much." It was the last honest thing he said to me. An hour later, the lights went out in the cellar level. Bianca sent me to fetch preserved jars from the cool room because the cooks had lost a key, and Maria swore starvation was imminent, which would have sounded funny on any other day. I took the servant stair with a lamp in one hand and my other braced against the wall. The cellar smelled of old stone, oil, and citrus crates. I found the jars. I found the open storeroom. I found, too late, the shape moving behind me. A cloth hit my mouth. I fought, harder than I would have a month ago. Elbows, nails, the lamp shattered, someone cursed. I tasted chemicals and panic, and managed one muffled scream before darkness narrowed. When I woke, my wrists were tied in front of me, and my head throbbed in rhythm with the baby's frightened heaviness. I was in a storage room I did not know, brick walls, single bulb damp climbing the corners, a chair, a metal table, and Luca Ferretti at the door. For one full second I could not understand what I was seeing, then I did. "You," I whispered. His face looked older than it had that morning. "I'm sorry." Sorry was too small for the room. The door opened behind him, and Vittorio De Luca entered wearing a dark suit and the kind of smile good men only ever make at children or dogs. On him, it looked like corruption refined into manners. "Signorina Russo," he said, "you have become expensive." I hated that my body remembered before my mind did. The sweet cologne, the silver-black crest, the feeling of danger wrapped in civility. "You," I said again, but this time it was for him. Vittorio's mouth curved. "Ah, recognition, we make progress." He sat across from me as though this were an interview. "Your child is inconvenient." My skin turned to ice. "You won't touch my baby." He looked amused by the word "my." "That depends on how difficult you make this." Luca stood rigid by the wall, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder, as if cowardice could become mercy if it didn't meet my face. "Why?" I asked him, because betrayal always wants a shape. "Why would you do this?" His throat worked once. "My brother, Vittorio, had him in Catania. For 18 months. Pain flared through me so violently it nearly resembled pity. Vittorio spread one hand. "Family is a persuasive language. Surely Casa Salvetor has taught you that." That was the worst part. Not the cruelty, the familiarity. He was exactly what Dante might have become if grief had stripped the last nerve from him. Elegant, efficient, certain that innocence was only currency waiting to be counted. He leaned forward. "You and I are going to correct the books. There are pages Lucia copied before she died. Dante has the ledgers. You have seen enough to help me identify what remains. And if I do..." His eyes flicked to my stomach. I forgot fear then, really forgot it. What replaced it was colder. "Go to hell," he smiled. "There, that one is Salvator's influence." He left me there with Luca and a guard. Time became liquid, hard to measure. Luca cut the rope at my wrists once the door closed, but that almost made it worse. Mercy after betrayal always does. "I didn't know they'd take you," he said. I laughed. It sounded terrible. "Who did you think they'd take? A crate of oranges?" His face flinched. "Good. Then I did the one thing fear could not stop anymore. I looked around. Metal table, old receipts in a box by the wall. Damp soft cardboard, a rusted shelving tag tied with wire. My hands still knew paper. They still knew sequence. I tore a strip from one receipt, pricked my thumb against the wire, and wrote one word in blood where only a careful eye would look. Cellar. When Luca turned, I tucked the strip into the seam of a preserve crate marked for the main kitchen. If Maria saw it, she would scream the house down. "Don't make me hurt you," Luca said roughly. I looked up at him. "You already did." His eyes closed. Much later, minutes or hours, I couldn't tell, Vittorio returned with a folder, my clinic file, my confirmation slip, the date circled in blue. "Do you know why that date mattered to Dante?" he asked. I said nothing. "Because Lucia opened the wrong drawer on September 14th. She found a list of children placed where they did not belong and mothers paid to stay silent. She thought truth protected itself." His smile thinned. "It does not." The bulb buzzed overhead. Then from somewhere beyond the thick walls I heard it, a metallic click, once, distinct, impossible. Vittorio heard it too, his expression sharpened. The second shot came from the corridor. Men shouted. The guard by the door fell before he finished turning. Luca's hand went to his gun, then stopped halfway, as if his body had not decided yet which betrayal to complete. I stood. Vittorio grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. The cellar door splintered inward, and Dante stepped through the dust like judgment, finally tired of waiting. The first thing I saw was Dante's face. Not the gun, not the men behind him, his face. I had seen him angry, cold, bleeding, restrained so tightly it hurt to look at him. I had never seen this. This was what remained after restraint failed. Not rage as spectacle, rage as function. Vittorio dragged me backward by the arm, his gun pressing cold under my ribs. "Careful," he called over the dust. "You've already lost one woman in a records room." Everything stopped. Not in the room, in Dante. He went utterly still. That silence was more terrifying than shouting. "Let her go," he said. Vittorio smiled. "And lose my leverage?" I felt my own fear sharpen into something useful. In front of me on the metal table lay the folder Vittorio had brought in. My file. A handful of copied clinic sheets. One heavy glass paperweight shaped like a pomegranate. I closed my free hand around it. Dante's eyes flicked to mine. Once. Enough. He wouldn't tell me what to do. He wouldn't risk distracting me. But in that one look I understood something I had not fully named before. He trusted me to move when it mattered. Vittorio kept talking. Men like him always believed their refinement made them more interesting than violence did. You and I are not so different, Dante. We both know the world runs on who can be sacrificed quietly. That was the mirror. Clear now. The shape Dante had feared in himself. The man who could turn grief into policy and call it wisdom. I moved on the next lightning flash. The paperweight came down hard on Vittorio's hand. Bone cracked. His gun fired wild into brick. I twisted free and dropped. Dante shot the guard at the wall before the man finished lifting his weapon. Luca lunged, not at Dante, at Vittorio. Taking the second shot meant for him in the chest. The room detonated into sound. Someone pulled me by the shoulders. I fought until Dante's voice hit my ear. "Elena, it's me." Then I was against him, hard enough to bruise. His hand at the back of my head, the other around my waist, checking without checking, counting damage by touch. My body shook once all the way through and would not stop. "I left a note," I heard myself say stupidly. His breath hit my temple, almost a laugh and almost grief. "I know." Luca hit the floor on one knee with blood soaking his shirt. Vittorio disappeared into the corridor in the chaos, one of his men dragging him by the good arm. Oscar burst in breathless behind two guards. "Please tell me I didn't run downstairs just to die in a pickle cellar." Then he saw Luca. Ah! That one sound held all the humor he didn't let himself use. Dante lowered me carefully onto the chair and crossed to Luca. The room narrowed around them, around history, around cost. Luca coughed blood. "He had my brother." "I know," Dante said. "You always know too late." A terrible softness entered Dante's face. "Yes." Luca looked past him to me, and for the first time since the betrayal, I saw the man who had held doors and left blankets and warned me to lock windows. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice breaking now. "I thought I could feed him scraps, roots, schedules, not her. I wanted to hate him cleanly. The world would have been easier if I could." But pain had already complicated him beyond that. "Did your brother live?" I asked. His eyes found mine, surprised. "No." The answer entered the room and stayed there. Dante knelt to put pressure on Luca's wound. Matteo shoved in a second later with his bag and a string of curses hot enough to peel paint. Oscar took one look around and muttered, "This is why I prefer my crises carb-related." No one laughed. Matteo worked. Blood kept coming. Luca gripped Dante's wrist with weakening fingers. "Don't become him," Luca whispered. Dante didn't answer. He didn't need to. Luca died 10 minutes later with Dante's hand still on him. Afterward, the house moved into battle rhythm again. Search teams, closed gates, orders thrown through radios. Vittorio had escaped into the storm with one ruined hand and a list of reasons to come back crueler. But for one suspended hour, the war receded to the edges. Matteo insisted I lie down in the chapel infirmary. Bianca cleaned dried blood from my face with hands that were rough only because tenderness embarrassed her. Maria cried into my hair and called me reckless. Oscar stood at the door holding a sandwich no one had asked for and said, with red-rimmed eyes, "This is from grief, not diet failure." When they finally left, Dante stayed. He stood by the small sink with his sleeves rolled, washing Luca's blood from his hands. The chapel light made him look carved from old damage. I watched water run pink, then clear. "Come here," he said without turning. I should not have. I did. He dried his hands, faced me. There was soot on his cheek and a small cut under his eye I hadn't noticed before. I reached up before I could think and touched it with 2 fingers. His breath changed. "You came for me," I said softly. He looked almost angry at the simplicity of it. "Yes, you trusted me to move. Yes. Why?" This time he answered without hiding. "Because you always see the break in a room before anyone else does." His gaze dropped to my hand against his face. "And because even terrified, you make order instead of surrender." A pause, rougher now. "God help me, Alina, I wanted that from the first day." The use of my name undid something. I stood on shaking feet, not to meet him boldly. Nothing in me was bold. But there are moments when uncertainty itself becomes a kind of honesty. "If you stop this time," I whispered, "I'll understand." His eyes closed once. Then he kissed me, not hard, not devouring, a slow, careful claiming that asked before it took. His hand cupped the back of my neck. Mine fisted in his shirt. I tasted rain, smoke, and the terrible restraint he had spent weeks using against himself. When he pulled back, our foreheads stayed together. "Quiet girl," he said, and now the words were wrecked with tenderness. Outside, men were still hunting. Vittorio was still breathing. Luca was still newly dead. But inside that little room, held between incense and blood and the shape of survival, we crossed the line that could not be uncrossed. By dawn, we both knew one of us might not survive what came next. The final violence came in daylight. That felt wrong somehow. Night belonged to men like Vittorio. Daylight made what they did look too plain. By then we knew where he would go. Lucia's missing pages had been hidden where piety and secrecy crossed, the ruined coast chapel whose ledgers we had restored. Bianca found the clue in Lucia's old prayer book. Matteo found the route Vittorio would use from the port. Oscar found, somehow, the nerve to joke while loading extra magazines into a case and muttering that if he died before Maria kissed him, he would haunt the pantry. "I will salt your ghost," Maria told him. "Is that flirting?" "No, promising." Even Dante's mouth moved at that. We drove at noon. I should have been left behind. Everyone said so, except the one person who mattered. Dante stood in the armory hall checking his weapon and looked at me once, long and measuring. "You stay beside Matteo until I say otherwise." "You brought me." I said beside Matteo, "Don't make me repeat myself." That was his version of consent to my presence. Imperfect, real. The coast chapel stood above black rocks, half collapsed toward the sea. Salt had eaten the lower stones. Wind moved through broken arches with the sound of distant whispering. It had once been a place for baptisms, then burials, then secrets. We entered to the smell of brine, candle wax, and old damp paper. Vittorio was waiting by the altar with his hand bound in white linen. Men flanked him in the nave, more in the side aisles. Enough guns to turn prayer into an accounting method. "You brought the girl," he said, gaze sliding to me. "Predictable." Dante stepped slightly in front of me without appearing to. You burned Lucia for numbers. Vittorio gave a tiny shrug. She was sentimental, and you are dead. Perhaps, his eyes sharpened, but not before we settle the ledger between us. What followed happened too fast for memory and too slow for mercy. Gunfire in a stone church is a different kind of horror. It turns holy acoustics into violence that won't stop echoing. Matteo dragged me behind a fallen column as splinters of old pews flew. Oscar cursed, with inspired religious creativity from the transept. Maria, who had absolutely disobeyed orders and come with medical supplies, shouted at him to duck while doing it herself half a second too late. I saw Dante only in flashes, moving low, efficient. Never wasting a bullet, never looking theatrical enough to call it rage. Men went down because he had already decided where they would. Then Vittorio broke for the sacristy. Dante followed. I should have stayed behind the column. I didn't. Maybe that was my last real mistake. Maybe it was the choice that ended the war. Those two things are sometimes the same. Inside the sacristy, the air smelled of mold and char. Old record shelves lined the walls. Lucia's pages lay scattered across a table where Vittorio had been sorting them into fire. He turned when he saw me. "Ah," he said softly, "the child with inconvenient timing." His gun came up. I grabbed the first thing at hand, a brass incense stand, and swung. It caught his wounded hand. He fired into the ceiling. Stone rained down. I stumbled back into the shelves. Then Dante was there. He hit Vittorio hard enough to send both of them through a table. The fight that followed was ugly because real fights are. No speeches, no elegance. Just breath, impact, and two men who knew exactly where the other would go because somewhere inside they shared a map. Vittorio got the knife first. He drove it toward Dante's side. Dante caught his wrist. Blood slicked both their hands. The blade wavered. "Do it," Vittorio hissed. "Become me." That was the final temptation, not to kill. Dante had killed before. To kill for the same reason Vittorio did, because it was easier than carrying what survived. Dante's eyes changed. For one terrible heartbeat, I thought he would. Then I saw Lucia's pages under my foot. Names, dates, proof, witness. The dead asking not for revenge alone, but for record. "Dante," I said. He heard me, not the word, the difference. He drove Vittorio backward into the half-burned shelf, disarmed him, and shot him once through the chest. Clean, final, not execution prolonged into theater. Sentence carried out. Vittorio looked almost disappointed as he fell. Outside, the gunfire thinned, then stopped. "It is over," the silence said before anyone else did, but victory was not clean. It never is. Oscar came in supporting Maria, who had blood on her sleeve, not her own. Matteo followed with his bag, and one look that told me too much. Bianca had taken a bullet grazing the shoulder but would live. Two guards would not. Luca was already in the ground. The Salvator Commission would turn vicious over Vittorio's death. Dante had won, but he had done it by stepping fully into power he despised. He looked at Vittorio's body for a long second too long. Then he turned away from it and came to me. There was blood at his side after all. Not deep, Matteo said later. Painful enough, real enough. I touched his face with shaking fingers. "You came back." His answer was almost a whisper. "I heard you." Not saw, heard. That mattered in ways I would spend the rest of my life understanding. When we carried Lucia's pages out of the chapel, the sea wind caught them once like wings, and then settled. At the chapel threshold, Dante looked back at the ruined altar, the body, the shelves, the place where his sister's death had finally found its witness. Then he said the words the whole war had been waiting for. "It is over." War leaves paperwork. That was the first thing I learned about peace, not emotional peace. We were nowhere near that. I meant the practical kind. Funeral arrangements, bank transfers, men moved from one estate to another. Safe houses closed, lawyers called, priests pretended not to know why they were suddenly busier. The house grew quieter by degrees, the way bruises fade, slowly, in colors you don't expect. Bianca healed enough to resume insulting everyone by the second week. Maria returned to the kitchen, and began feeding the household, as if carbohydrates were the purest possible act of defiance. Oscar, after getting clipped across the shoulder in the chapel and milking it shamelessly, discovered that being nearly killed improved his standing with Maria only marginally. "She brought me soup," he reported to me in wonder one afternoon. "Granted, she said it was because she didn't want blood on the tile if I collapsed, but still. That's practically a sonnet," I said. He pressed a hand to his chest. "You understand romance." I was laughing when Dante came into the kitchen. The room didn't freeze the way it once had. That was one measure of what had changed. Men still straightened, voices still dropped, but now Maria merely pointed a spoon at him and said, "If you bleed on my floor again, I resign." He inclined his head. "Noted." Then his gaze found me at the pastry table, where I stood elbow-deep in sugar and orange zest. Pregnancy had sharpened my appetite and my temper in equal measure. Baking calmed one and protected others from the second. "What are you making?" he asked. "Something Bianca says is excessive." Bianca, from the pantry. "It is." I looked back at the tart shell in my hands. Burnt orange cream, bitter on the bottom, sweet in the middle. Sugar glass on top. Oscar leaned over the counter. "That is either dessert or a psychological profile." I met Dante's eyes despite myself. "Maybe both." Something warm and private moved through his face. He understood before I did that I had made myself in pastry again. The hard shell, the hidden softness, the fragility where nobody first looked. Later, when the kitchen emptied and evening light turned the copper pans soft, he found me washing flour from my wrists at the stone sink. No guards, no urgency, just him and the sound of water. He stood behind me for a moment without speaking. Then he reached around, turned off the tap, and handed me a towel. "Come with me," he said. "Where? You'll see." That answer would once have frightened me. Now it only made my pulse change. He led me not to the chapel or the study or any dramatic room at all, but to the small family sitting room off the old library. No one used it much. There were books with broken spines, a lamp with a crooked shade, and one armchair repaired badly at the seam. The most ordinary room in the house. On the table lay his silver lighter. Beside it a ring, not enormous, not vulgar, old gold with a square emerald set low enough to survive daily life. I stopped breathing for one beat. "This is not very romantic," he said. I laughed softly because only Dante would begin there. "No, no." He looked almost irritated by his own honesty. "I don't know how to do that part correctly." I stepped closer. "Then do your part." His eyes held mine. "I don't have a fairy tale version of this to offer you. My world will stay dangerous. My name will stay heavy. There will be nights I leave and you won't sleep until I come back. There will be blood in rooms where there should only be children." His voice roughened, almost imperceptibly. "But there will never be a day when you stand alone in any of it." My eyes burned instantly. He picked up the ring, not yet reaching for my hand, giving me room. Always, somehow, the room mattered more than the gesture. "I am asking," he said, "not because the house expects it, not because the child requires it. Because when you walked back in from that train platform, I understood that whatever was left of my life would feel unfinished without you in it." A breath. "Stay, quiet girl." There it was. The nickname that had begun as observation, then possession, then protection. Now it sounded like home. I gave him my hand because speech had abandoned me. He slid the ring on carefully, as if he were still afraid he might hurt me by wanting too much. "It fits," I whispered. "Bianca has terrifying skills." From the doorway, Bianca said, "I heard that." Oscar's head appeared beside hers. "I also heard that, and for the record, if anyone wishes to propose to me, I prefer diamonds and fewer bullets." Maria yanked him back by the collar. "You can propose to your boiled eggs." Dante closed his eyes briefly. A man accepting the terms of joy only because he had finally understood it would never arrive dignified. I leaned up and kissed him first on the jaw, barely, softly, enough to make him still. That was all I could do. All I wanted to risk in front of witnesses and kitchen women and the ghost of everything we had survived. It was enough. That night we sat in the crooked lamp room with my feet in his lap while rain started against the windows, gentle this time. Not war rain, ordinary rain. For us, that was almost miraculous. 8 months later, the first thing I heard was the click. Metal on metal, clean, familiar, loved. Our son was asleep against my shoulder in the blue room that had once been a nursery, and then a hiding place, and was now simply his. The morning sun warmed the terrace tiles. Somewhere downstairs, Oscar was arguing that fatherhood had inspired him to abandon vanity, and Maria was informing him that this was fortunate, since vanity had never favored him. Some things improve. Some stay blessedly themselves. I crossed the hall with the baby tucked against me and found Dante in the study by the window, jacket off, tie loose. The silver lighter turning through his fingers, while he read reports that would have made lesser men start wars out of boredom. The room smelled of coffee, paper, and the colder edge of his cologne lifting from skin that had been outside in dawn air. On the desk stood a vase of white lilies, fresh this time, not dying. He looked up when I entered, and something in my chest still altered after all this time. That had not become smaller with knowledge, only quieter, deeper, more dangerous in its permanence. "You should be resting," he said. "I rested 6 minutes, it was thrilling." His mouth moved, almost a smile, fully his. The baby made a sleepy sound. Dante set the lighter down immediately and came forward with both hands already sure. He always held our son as if the child were both miraculous and entirely expected, which may be the most masculine thing I had ever seen him do. I passed the baby over. Their dark heads bent instinctively toward one another. For one impossible second, grief and violence and history all stood at a distance and watched us fail to deserve this much tenderness. Then I noticed the desk. The lighter lay near an open file, a real file this time, staff rotations, delivery ledgers. The lilies had turned slightly, one side toward the window, one toward shadow. Without thinking, I crossed the room, closed the file, aligned the lighter parallel to its edge, and turned the flowers so they faced the light. Silence settled. When I looked up, Dante was watching me with our son in his arms and that old expression in his face, startled, fierce, undone by something too small for anyone else to notice. There it was. The bookend. The first day I had entered his study, afraid and hidden and trying to disappear, I had picked up his lighter and straightened dead flowers instead of begging. It had unsettled him because nobody in his world tried to make ugliness gentler. They only survived it. Now, months later, in the same room, I had done it again with a child on my hip and a ring on my hand and no fear left of being seen. "What?" I asked softly. He shifted the baby higher against his chest. "You still do it." I knew exactly what he meant. "Fix rooms. Refuse to let them stay the shape violence left them." My throat tightened. He came closer. The baby sighed between us, warm and impossibly trusting. Dante's gaze moved from my face to my hand on the vase and back again. "In the beginning," he said, voice low, "I thought it unsettled me because it was strange." His thumb brushed our son's blanket. "Now I know it costs you something every time. To believe a room can be gentler after what you've seen." I laughed through the ache in my chest. "That sounds like an accusation." "It is." His eyes darkened with feeling he no longer hid from me. "Against every man who ever taught you silence was safer than being kept." The baby yawned. Dante looked instantly wrecked by it. I reached for the lighter. He let me take it. Cool silver. Familiar weight. I opened it once. Click, then closed it and set it in his palm. The same gesture as the beginning, completely different meaning. Not threat, not interrogation. Home. Downstairs, Oscar shouted, "Maria, if this is another low-salt broth, know that my spirit is not infinite." Maria shouted back, "Your spirit is built from olives and cowardice." Our son startled. Then settled again at Dante's voice. "Easy," he murmured. I watched him soothe what he once would have believed himself unfit to touch, and the oldest wound in him shifted quietly under the skin. Not gone. He would always carry Lucia into every room where paper mattered and children slept. I would always carry the woman I had been before the gala, before the file, before the date turned my life into evidence. We had not erased what happened. We had built around it, carefully enough that love could stand there too. He bent and kissed my forehead, the same place he had kissed me the night he first restrained himself from wanting more than I could bear. Now there was no restraint in it, only knowledge. Only earned gentleness. "Come to breakfast, quiet girl," he said, warm now, entirely warm. I touched the baby's tiny fist where it rested against his shirt. In a minute, we stood that way a little longer in the study where my life had broken open and then, somehow, reformed itself into something ordinary enough to be sacred. The lilies faced the light. The lighter rested in his hand, and for the first time in my life, silence did not mean I was alone inside it. Would you have chosen Dante and let all that darkness become part of your child's inheritance? Have you ever loved someone enough to walk back in with your eyes open?